To call the Design Review Board meeting to order. This is our November 13th meeting. And Jeff, would you take the roll call, please?
Yeah. Member Burns, Member Cooper,
Present.
Member Mitchell,
Here.
Member Kinley,
Here.
Member Perkins,
Here.
Member Singleton, Member Buckwalter,
Here.
Member Kotarski.
Here. And I'd like to start out by welcoming John Kotarski. He's new to the Design Review Board from the Public Arts Commission. And we're glad to have you, John, and welcome.
Thank you.
So our purpose in the Design Review Board is to engender good design in the community. We're a group of landscape architects, developer, a planner, a general contractor, who have been around town for a while, and we try to offer advice and create a dialogue with applicants as they come in. We review projects that are in the D1, D2, DDA zone that are not in one of the historic districts. And we are an advisory committee. Applicants are required to come here first. We're the first stop, but we do not take a vote, and we do not have jurisdiction over the project. It's more a dialogue than a dictate. So saying all of that, we should approve the agenda first. Does anyone have any comments, anything they'd like to change? Someone like to move the agenda be approved? Bill?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Thank you. And approval of the minutes from September 11th, 2019. They're attached in your packet. Anybody have any corrections or comments? Okay, would someone like to move approval, please? Bill's on the roll. Oh, Corey's going to do this. Okay.
I'll support.
Corey and Bill Kinley supports. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? All right, thank you. There's a public commentary period now, and this is a little confusing. This is public commentary for items that are not on our agenda. The item on our agenda will have a second public commentary period after the presentation is done. So if anyone would like to speak to us about items not on the agenda, now's the time. I'm looking in the audience. Okay, thank you. Regular business. Okay, this is 405 South Main. This is half of the block that fronts on Main Street to the west, and William to the north, Packard to the south, in the alley between 4th and Main to the east. It's that entire block. We saw this project about a year ago, and it's a little unusual in that it is now, I have been told, into the planning process. And as I just said, we're usually earlier in the game, but we've been asked to take a look at this. There are some revisions to the design team and to the design, so we're happy to do that. If you folks could walk us through it, I appreciate that.
Good afternoon. My name is Luke Bonner with the Bonner Advisory Group. We've been working with Landmark Properties for about a year now, just on this project. I'm going to just talk about the process that we've been through over the last year.
Who is with you, just real quick?
I was going to do that.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
I'm going to talk about the process that we've been through over the last year. Josh Sachs is with Majewski Architects, and then Travis Mazes is with Bonner Advisory Group as well.
Okay.
So what you have before you is really a result of a process that has gone on over the last year that really started with coming to the Design Review Board with a massing model more than anything else to sort of get the first impression of the massing and the scale that we were proposing as part of this project. It was actually our intent all along to come back 2 other times after that. So we did come around probably in late spring with a lot of changes that happened from our first meeting, and then now today wanted to also bring this forward for you to take a look at again, as I say, going through this process over the last year. And I would say that the process that the city has in place, I think, for projects like this, at least in our opinion, has been a really good one. I know that normally, going through the development process, there's a requirement called the Citizen Participation Ordinance, where you have to have one official public meeting of neighbors and residents within the affected area, including the 3 design review board meetings, today being the 3rd. In those meetings, we've had about a dozen meetings, actually. So we never really wanted to rely just on one meeting. We've had several informal meetings, and then we've also had, a couple of meetings with one-on-one with residents to talk through some very important items for them. And so as the process has gone on, both comments provided by the design review board early on, by Jeff Kahn and his team in planning, and by residents, there were about 4 areas that were extremely important to everybody as part of this process. And Josh is going to talk about more of the technical details on that. But the Packard and Main corner, that street wall, there was a lot of emphasis on activating that. And if you recall, the very first rendering that we brought in, that was pretty much a blank wall. So there have been a lot of changes, and rightfully so, on the Packard Main corner. The other interest was along the Main street wall, making sure that there was a lot of texture and variation and activity with that. Third was the setback from a pedestrian safety standpoint at the corner of William and Main, and then also heading east on Main, to make sure that that was a safe enough setback and would match the setback that would be on Main Street. And then last but not least, in one of the more important issues in terms of dialogue of working with the adjacent property owners themselves, is what exactly happens with the alley. So there are access issues that were very important to alley property owners, because they're all multi-tenant rental properties. The parking for those properties is in the alley. So we wanted to make sure we could address those issues. For, really forever, the alley has not had any eyes on it. And so there's been a set of behaviors that have occurred in the alley, both after hours, I'll say, but also during the day with deliveries and staging of trucks in the alley that's preventing some good traffic flow. So that was an issue that's been brought up. And then also just making sure that there's good maneuverability and spacing that allows traffic coming in and out both ways to access the property of the adjacent owners, but also this property as well. When we had all of those discussions over the course of, probably really about 5 or 6 months, there was a pause internally with Landmark and the development team to make sure that we were taking everything into account and incorporating all of those comments into this. So as a result, we did a pivot on the architect. So we brought in Majewski Associates July-ish. Time's bleeding together now. And it's so cold out, I'm losing my mind. But it really was, I think, the flexibility and capability of Majewski from experience here in town, but just, what I'll say is the talent on the team to be able to take all of those things in and put it into a product, I think that everybody's would hopefully be very, very happy with, which is, I think, where we are today. There are a couple of residents in the audience today that have come to the majority of the meetings, so they've seen this iterative process along the way. And today is kind of our, for design review board purposes, it's sort of like our best and final, take a look and, kind of let us know how you think everything has gone, and answer any additional questions that you may have. And with that, I want to invite Josh up so he can talk a little more technically about those changes that I referred to, including materials and design and that sort of thing. So.
Hi all, thanks for your time. So I'll just start kind of from a zoning and kind of programmatic perspective. The project is very similar to how it was previously presented in terms of, it's a 10-story building, mixed use, predominantly multifamily. The first floor is active with retail on the William and the Main Street corner. There's some residential uses down Main Street about halfway down the block. And then as you approach Packard, we try to kind of activate that corner. Our lobby leasing centers on that corner, and then we amenitized along Packard Street. So we have kind of our fitness area and spa area there as well. So trying to maintain an active street front, and then levels 2 through 10 are multifamily. The second floor, we have exterior deck, so about halfway down Main, you can see where the break is in the facade, and that's kind of where our outdoor deck space is. Obviously, from a zoning perspective, we're allowed 120 feet maximum height within 150 feet of William Street, and then the project reduces that in scale to 5 stories and 60 feet maximum height. From an architectural standpoint, it was really important to kind of create, it's a 3-fronted site. We have 3 street fronts and 2 prominent corners. So trying to create those 2 power corner elements and trying to accentuate those and kind of maximize our bang for the buck kind of on the corner with maximizing glass and kind of making our big bold moves there. And then kind of just keeping true to masonry and the materiality that you see in the area. So trying to maximize the amount of brick we have on the facade. Obviously, it's a 400-foot long street. It's a long facade, so trying to break that up with some metal elements. So on the corner, on the corner of William and Main, we have a curtain wall element that's kind of surrounded by a metal panel frame. And as you move down the block, we kind of alternate and trying to create some rhythm and break up the mass of the facade as we move down between masonry and metal panel. Introducing some balcony elements to kind of give it a residential character and also help break up that facade as well. Obviously, maintaining the street wall, the 2-story street wall, was important as well, and we kind of feel using darker materials at the base kind of helps ground the building, and using lighter materials up high, kind of help reduce the mass and the perceived heaviness of the project. We've been working with the neighborhood groups, and the colors on the facade have changed a little bit during the process, and in general, the neighbors appreciated kind of a lighter material palette. From some of our first initial schemes, they were concerned the buildings appeared too dark. And kind of gravitating more towards earth tones on the project. So originally, we were a lot cooler palette. This is a little bit of a warmer palette. And maybe I'll just walk around the 4 sides. So the other corner down at Packard, we kind of carry that same corner element with a very glassy element on the corner. That's at the base is the entry to our lobby leasing office. And then as you move east down Packard, that's where our fitness center is. So trying to, even though there's not a retail element, kind of trying to keep that language along the base was important, and trying to activate that corner and keep it kind of lively down there. Along the alley, we kind of have a split level garage on the back side of the project. So there's 2 entrances. One entrance takes you down a half story, and one entrance takes you up a half story as well. So if you see in the plans, there's on the south side, you're going down to the half story down. On the north side, you're going up. And then we have some open green space along the alley to meet our requirements. We're also engaged with, from our neighborhood group, we got hooked up with some artists in the neighborhood, and we're going to try to work with them to create an art piece in that corner. So we're definitely open to ideas and open to working with the neighborhood to kind of come up with solutions that work for the area. This is the facade looking down William, looking west. Oh, sure.
We didn't get, we got a last minute packet, I think it was today. There's no floor plan, site plan, anything in it, and we got a package maybe 2 weeks ago. Maybe it was in there, but I didn't think to bring that package.
Okay, I have some plans here. if you want.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Did we get site plans in that last packet?
I don't think we got electronic.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Josh.
Sure. So the back 2 pages are the floor plans.
Thank you.
I've got one.
Sure.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Josh, that's helpful.
So really, as you work your way around the building, the material palette stays pretty consistent. We want the project to be cohesive. And certainly the downtown requires, a really nice material palette. And they emphasize the use of brick and high-quality materials, and we want that to continue around the backside of the project as well. Along the street, a lot of storefront awnings to kind of help the pedestrian experience. And once again, just trying to break up the length of the facade. Certainly the element in the middle where we kind of break the building and kind of snake around the project helps reduce the perceived mass of the project, which I think is, beneficial to the project as a whole. And really that's kind of the crux of the project, and I'm certainly welcome to any questions you guys have.
Where are the entry points, Josh?
The pedestrian or the vehicular?
Pedestrian.
Pedestrian? So the lot, this one doesn't have the plans. So along Main, there's the entrance to the tower. There's essentially two lobbies to the building. So there's the primary lobby is in the corner of Packard, and that's kind of where your leasing office is. There's a secondary lobby 2/3 of the way up Main Street at the base of the building. That's kind of more just a ingress and egress to access the high-rise, but it's really not the main lobby on the building.
Okay. And then all the entries to the retail are
Scattered,
scattered
yeah,
along
sure.
the street front?
Yep.
Okay. I've got one other clarification question. Those dark and shadowed areas we see adjacent to the windows out, is that a different color brick or finish material, or are those vertical unit vent louvers?
The textured panels that kind of alternate,
Uh-huh.
yeah, those
yes.
are alternating color brick.
There,
Yep.
okay. Okay.
And we felt those elements were kind of important to give the building a little texture and movement. Otherwise, it kind of would have been so stoic and kind of plain. So we think that helps accentuate the building.
So have you indicated egress into the, rental housing that's along 4th Street in the back? Certain people, I think, require access, some maybe don't. Have you at all tried to delineate where there's going to be driveways, or is the alley two-way, one-way?
I believe the alley is two-way. We came to an agreement and we're providing an additional 2 feet of alley width south of our ramp entry, because right now the alley, I believe, is 16 feet.
Yeah, I can talk
Yeah,
about it
sure.
real quick. So the property owners to the east, they don't have driveways, but it's the paved surface that is on the east side of the alley is where all of the parking spaces are. So I don't believe there's any driveways that actually come off of the alley, just paved surface on the other side of the alley. And to Josh's point, on the south side, we actually expanded the alley width another 2 feet. So when you're coming on that south end, there's an easy two-way traffic opportunity. And as you go north on the alley, it slims down a little bit, but there's still enough room for 2 cars to go both ways. So it is technically a two-way alley.
Is
That
it
makes sense.
two-lane or two-way?
So it's two-way because the alley width is the alley width. It's 16 feet. So it's not going to be striped, but it's definitely a two-way alley. I can't remember if there was going to be signage posted on the one entrance coming
It's a
down.
one-way out.
Yeah. Was that going to happen?
I don't know,
Maybe
but
too much detail.
yeah.
The alley owned by the city,
Yes.
so it's their responsibility to be maintaining this
So
all the time.
as part of
Okay.
the project, the alley will be completely resurfaced. So what's there today is not what will be there when the project's done. So it will be completely resurfaced.
Maybe you could say that into the mic so they can hear us.
Sorry, guys.
Thanks.
Sorry to turn this conversation too casual.
Yeah.
So the alleyway itself will be resurfaced and improved. And in terms of long-term maintenance, I think that's something that, I don't typically know how that goes with the city. If there's an agreement where the developer ends up taking care of the alley because they're using it anyways, they're going to snow plow it and everything else, so.
It'll probably be part of your development agreement that comes out of the planning
Correct.
process. So, okay. Other comments?
Yeah, question. Could you sort of go through the general changes to the site plan from the previous one we saw? The one I noticed for sure is the elevation on Packard. I think there had been discussion about stair-stepping that facade, and this is a straight facade. I can't remember now what our logic was in suggesting that or talking it through, but that's one that's pretty obvious. What are the others? It looked to me like maybe the ramps are different.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not 100% familiar with the previous submittal. We kind of took a fresh approach to the project. Certainly, yes, I know there was it was more rectilinear on the corner, and it was stepping. We kind of felt like, I don't even know if that kind of totally meant the intent of the street wall experience, and we kind of feel like the way we kind of set it up, where we have a two-story experience that's parallel to Packard, is a stronger street wall, and lets us orient our facade more towards Packard than it did previously. I know there was a lot of blank facades there previously. I think programmatically, I mean, the parts and pieces are pretty similar in their locations. I don't believe the lobby used to be on the corner of Packard.
It wasn't.
So we relocated it there to kind of, just create more of an experience there and kind of open it up. The parking doesn't function the same way. I believe they had a full story basement previously that went underneath the full site. We found a way so we could just only orient that, along the eastern portion of the site, so we don't need a full basement. We're utilizing, there's like 4.5 feet of grade change along the property. So utilizing that and not having to build out a full basement was kind of a big move for us as well.
I think that one of the issues was that we talked about the last time was there's rental units right at grade, and that's something of an issue in terms of at least privacy and that kind of thing. The plans, I realize, are not fully developed, but you're suggesting that some of the retail units might be pushed back behind the facade ways, so there's maybe a space between, for instance, these units are rental units that might be behind the primary facade.
I think it's just the way the shadows are showing in that facade. It's kind of a play with the materials. I mean, right now, the residential does butt up to the street.
So it's like the plan.
It is like the plan, correct, yes. And that's something we did discuss with the owner, and they did feel comfortable from that perspective. Across the street there is residential, I believe there's townhomes across the street. I know they may be elevated somewhat. But as you go down Main, it's not a retail-heavy experience, so they did feel comfortable with the amount of pedestrian traffic in that area, putting residential along the street.
Remember, there was a lot of discussion about pickup and drop-off of taxis, buses, Ubers. that
Yes,
kind
so
of
we
thing.
actually did, along the alley, we kind of created these Uber zones, or these rideshare zone spaces, and also a loading space. So our goal is to not have anyone drive down Main Street and park there. So Amazon deliveries and rideshares can go along the alley, and we'll have dedicated spaces for them. It's not in this presentation. It's on the plans. It should be noted on the plans that they have. Yep.
Are you talking about the compact car spaces that are indicated? It says ride share on 2 of them.
There's 2 rideshare spaces kind of closest to the fitness area.
Yeah.
So right around the corner from the lobby.
So just past the entry to the garage.
Correct, yes.
SP01 shows that.
Yes,
the actual loading zone for trucks and so forth, that's just this one short stretch. I could say short, it's probably
I think it's 30.
about 50 feet long.
Yeah, so I mean, the project is furnished, it's fully furnished by the owner, so there's not a lot of loading and unloading required from, you know, tenants who occupy the building. So we don't anticipate utilizing that a lot, so our intent is that any UPS or FedEx trucks could park there and deliver off of that space. To the best that it can be
There's gonna
controlled.
There's gonna be a lot of people parking in that driveway.
There's going to be a lot going on, yeah.
And to the retail, whatever the retail is, if they get deliveries, it has to be out that same spot,
Sure.
doesn't it?
I remember in the first meeting, first presentation, the owners who lived along Fourth commented that the alley down by Real Seafood gets so busy that semis back up in the alley, and then people pull up into this alley and wait for that alley to clear. So they sit in this alley, wait for people to move through the alley to the north, and then they move across and go into that alley. And that's more of a policing issue, but it's a difficult problem.
Can I address that real quickly?
Sure.
Because we have talked about that quite a bit. And a lot of it is the behavioral issue of no eyes on the alley today. So there is a lot of staging out there for deliveries. In fact, when we've done some of our walking tours of the site, there have been delivery trucks right in the alley, not moving. So one of the benefits of the improvement of the alley overall is that as a developer, owner, manager of the property, there's some certainty they want to deliver to residents that alley is going to be open. So there's going to be more policing, as you mentioned. There's 24-hour on-site security plus a camera system. So there's eyes on the alley. There will be policing of staging to make sure that that's not happening. And that's going to, long-term, there has to be a relationship with the city and on their behalf surrounding properties or surrounding businesses so that they know they have to sort of change that up. This isn't a staging area. And then the other issue is related to the parking. So adding the 2 ride shares allowed them to add that other drop-off delivery area as well. So the idea is for the neighboring property owners, take as much of the staging out of the alley as possible to prevent any backups or someone having to sit there and no access issues. So whereas today there isn't anybody doing that, now obviously they have residents, they want to make sure they have access, which the neighboring property owners would benefit from too.
Other comments or questions? Well, I'll fill the void, I've got a list. Let's see, so the dark shadows that we're seeing adjacent to all the windows are all just a different tone of brick in
That's
each
correct,
case?
yes.
Great, thank you. And I noticed the cornice heights in the 12-story element of the brick masses are slightly higher than the setback metal. And it works really well, yeah, there it is in that image, on that cornice line, but it didn't look like you employed the same technique on William or in the recessed area that you see along Main. And did you consider that? One of our thing is that downtown is typically 22-foot wide lots. Sometimes you get 44 and sometimes you get 66, but within each of those lots, the storefronts are bouncing all around at the cornice line. And you've gone to great lengths here to divide this up into different vertical masses. And what you did at that cornice line where the 12-story element is, really seems more effective than the other.
You're saying these brick you're saying between the
Yeah,
metal and the
there's
brick
just a
masses?
little bit of an offset. See, the light brick is taller
Sure, yeah.
than the recessed darker metal. But when you go over to William, I don't think, at least in the earlier drawing I saw,
Sorry.
no,
It's all
that's Packard.
It's kind of the same.
So, maybe I'm looking at an earlier drawing, or I'm not seeing this correctly. Did you employ that everywhere?
It is, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, good, thanks. And the dark metal is set back of the brick slightly. How big is that reveal? Is that a foot or is it 4 inches?
You're saying where
Right
there's
there.
that vertical element?
Yeah.
It's more inches than a foot, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it full-size brick or is it in
The
veneer?
full depth brick, you're asking?
Full depth, yeah.
It is, in the tower, we anticipate it being thin brick, adhered brick,
Thin brick?
yes.
Okay,
Just because of, just the sheer weight and,
so it's hard to return on a 90-degree corner, you can do it. So that reveal between the brick and the metal isn't going to be too pronounced. It's going to be more of a material
I mean,
change than a plane change.
correct. I mean, we do hope to get a little shadow line there between the two. And,
Okay.
as we develop it, we'll work on that detail and try to, make it as pronounced as it can be.
Okay. The last time it came around, when we saw it a year ago, the main entry was right in the middle of Main Street. And we commented that we thought the entry should be more pronounced. So just tell me if I understand this correctly, everything south of the tower, the entry point is down at Packard. And then the tower element, the entry point is up toward the corner of William and Main.
So, I mean, the primary experiential entry point is on the corner of Packard. But
Okay.
from a convenience perspective, for people living in the tower portion, it'll be, 1/3 of the way down Main Street.
Okay. Is there an active lobby behind that door? Is it a feature? That corner is a real important corner. Speaking of William and Main, what's happening?
On the corner of William and
Behind
Main?
the gates,
I mean,
yeah.
that's a retail corner,
Okay.
so we'll be in active use.
But there's an entry point too to the tower, right?
So the entry point to the towers, if you can see, is in this light
Oh, way
colored-
down there,
Yeah,
okay.
it's down here.
It's further down.
Got it, okay.
So everything north of there is
So
retail.
that's all retail glass?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. No, that's it.
Just
Go ahead,
wondering
Cory.
a little bit about the little corner. I think I heard you say that's the site for the public art piece? And was it set in that
Corner of the alley.
corner?
Packard.
Yeah, right now the open space.
Yeah. So is there any embellishment on that, or how, it's, It's a-
It actually came out
potentially-
it came out of our neighborhood meeting last week.
Oh,
And I know
yeah.
we've been in contact. We sent drawings to the representative, and we're kind of waiting for some feedback on
Okay.
what they want to propose.
so is it potentially just grass? I mean, it's an odd little area for just grass, or what are your plans?
No, I mean, it will be landscaped. It won't just be grass. I mean, there's no, I think until we work through with that individual and with the neighbors what is wanted, it's not currently designed, but the intent is to be something, substantial more than just open space.
Yeah, well, it does have potential, that location, and its housing, and could be a little more interactive and not just something to look at. You may want to think about how it could be usable by people and not like a shut-off statue surrounded by shrubs or something.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe it could be an interactive space.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's actually more, as you move west down Packard's toward Maine, there's some additional space in front of the building, so I'm not sure exactly where that art is intended to be or where it's desired to be, but it will be in that area, and there will be, additional landscaping within that area as well.
John?
Thank you, Luke and Josh, and I only offer a suggestion relative to the comments on the artwork, and it's probably bad that I start out apologizing and then offering advice, but I think it's important. I'm new to this project, I'm new to this board, I've been here 7 days. I've just seen your work just for a few of those days. And I'm reminded of a friend of mine who often said that good ideas are a dime a dozen. Go to any bar near any art school in America, and you'll hear 100 good ideas. That it's really timing, budget, team, and those sorts of things. So I offer these suggestions in that light. I have 2 ideas that I would like to suggest, and it takes off of what my fellow board member mentioned regarding that strip of land and where you are already planning to put some sort of artwork. I agree that it could be a sculpture garden, so a contemplative place. If there was not just artwork, but some way to sort of utilize the inspiration or whatever one gets from public art. Also, I would like to recommend you consider a rotating sculpture garden. There is a lot of support for something like that, meaning that the artwork in that place wouldn't just be fixed. It frankly would save some money for the developer because what it does is it leverages the demographic of Ann Arbor, that every artist drools over highly educated, high disposable income audience, that you could attract some mid-career and senior artists, not just regionally but nationally, to lend a piece for that. If you look at the University of Michigan's Museum of Art, those large pieces there are donated by the artists. So artists want their pieces shown. I would encourage you to have local artists exhibit. That could happen if you curated a rotating sculpture garden. So consider the artwork to possibly be rotating. There are a number of organizations here. Penny Stamp's School of Art has a gallery on Liberty, and I'm sure that they would be approachable to be able to curate it. And the Art Center and the Art Alliance are 2 organizations that would have contact with artists around. And again, that there is considerable support on council and in the creative community because there are very few places in Ann Arbor that we can put art. And wouldn't it be nice if we could rotate art in and out of those places? It might be a cost savings for you to some extent. You're going to have to probably pay for the curation. You might be able to get Penny Stamps to kind of do it, but I would encourage you to consider that and consider some sort of seating so that it's not just something that you see in a car that you walk by, although a pedestrian experience is very important, but to be a contemplative place so that you have grad students there to be able to sit and be inspired by this art. Good art does that. And I think it fits with what my fellow board member has said. And along that line, I'd like to reference the design guidelines regarding that. I've been encouraged to do so. So under A3 open space, the guideline speaks of open spaces to include public and private courtyards, patios, terraces, alleys, and gardens, and they should have an urban quality and character that enliven the street and enhance the pedestrian experience. A3.2 also talks about an urban open space at a high level of existing or potential pedestrian activity. I think that Packard will get a lot more activity, and you're situating, one of the main entrances there too. So you're going to get a lot of that, and our guidelines recommend that when you have open spaces near there, you consider that. A3.4 recommends that you consider that area, the courtyard, serving as a focal point. The kind of discussions that we've had here suggest that. And a 3.6 specifically mentions providing public art. So what you're already thinking about dovetails exactly into the guidelines. I'm adding just a couple of variations to it. One, rotate it so you get a lot of different artists in there. And you could have one large piece of art or several small pieces of art. But if people don't like it, they can just wait a few months because, you'll rotate it through. The second idea that I would like to sort of present, and while I'm on this topic, why don't I go into that? And that's really activating the alley space. And I'd like to share some of these photos with you. And if you could pass along, and I'll reference those. Sure, they're both for you. And I apologize, Dick, but staff saw these and said, oh my, you should really, much better than my haggard description of what could be.
John has a whole book of ideas that he'll send you.
Sounds good.
That's great.
Public art idea book, and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
share a link with you. So these are Trompe l'oeil murals, and the modern sort of 3D pictures are not what your grandmother's 3D pictures are like. So I want to reference in particular, I'm not good at other than drawing. So this is, what do you call this sort of piece of paper here? A rendering?
A rendering, yeah.
A rendering, a view from the southeast.
Yep.
So, and I apologize for my non-technical sort of terms. But you even mentioned, Josh, of trying to activate that particular wall, these two large walls here. I'm suggesting you think about a trompe l'oeil mural, and I have some examples where it's paint, but it gives the illusion that you're pulling back the skin of the building like a curtain to expose a more classical design. So it's kind of a takeoff on, oh, this looks like a modern building to you, but underneath of this modern building is this incredibly classical design. It would definitely draw attention to it, and some unique designs could be, could take what I hear you say is needing activation, and it's the reason you have the different colors there. Well, just push it over the edge and really go trompe l'oeil with it. In addition, the alley itself, so these suggestions are saying, you really want a signature building, and I've read this in the narrative, that what if the back of this building is as spectacular as the front? And you can do it with trompe l'oeil murals. And so all along that back parking, that you create a streetscape. And, and I would encourage you to think about a historical streetscape. We have some sort of representatives of the Historical Commission here tonight or this afternoon, and that you could, and there are examples that if this particular image right here, you see there are balconies, that's all paint. And you see below, it looks like there's a porch and it looks like people are sitting. That's not, that's all painted on there. And if you could do the same with that in terms of creating a streetscape from the back of the building. And I also would encourage you, if you flip over, these are what I call Instagram kind of features. And this is a really big thing now that people want to take selfies. So if you allow them, you create something where they could put themselves into sort of this mural and take a photo and put it on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. And there is that on Maynard and William, that on the Tower Plaza, that my wife teaches at the U, and she is in the English department, goes to graduation, I pick her up, and there are hordes during graduation week. There's these butterfly wings, and there are lines of people waiting to get their picture taken with these wings and their cap and gown. So if you could create some interesting kind of trompe-l'oeil features on the back of that, a streetscape, historical if you can, but if not, just bring out some action activity and draw people there to do something. Sort of be inspired in the sculpture garden, tease a little bit of the modern design with a trompe-l'oeil sort of curtain pulled away, and a literal streetscape on that alley. So again, you know, ideas are a dime a dozen, and I come late to the game. I apologize to my fellow board members, you know, and to you if you've already thought of this and it doesn't work. That's absolutely fine. That's all I have, Chairman.
And I've got some more comments. Jeff, do you have anything? You haven't had a shot yet.
Yeah, my biggest concern is that it's almost like this presentation today to us is as though we only care about the exterior of this building. I care a lot about the entire piece of architecture, and we're seeing the floor plan, unless I missed something in a submission.
No.
This is the first time I've seen these floor plans. There's no site plan. There's no articulation about landscaping the site or what's left of it. So I'm basically just digesting this for the first time right now, and I'm not sure I'm ready to make any comments about it.
Yeah, Bill, do you
Well,
have anything to add?
my only comment, there was a fair amount of discussion last time about making sure that the view coming up the hill on Main Street, in other words, going north on Main, when you come to that intersection, there's something, maybe I'm stretching to say exciting happening in that corner, but something that makes it distinctive. And that's where this lobby is, and there's nothing particularly distinctive. It has a little shelter piece there, but have you given any thought to making that a little bit more of a standout? You have only two corners to work with, and this is the one that's going to probably get more views from people coming up from the south than almost any other place in downtown Ann Arbor, and I'd encourage you to do something there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we you know, attempted to make, as I mentioned, there's kind of like two signature corners on the project. You know, we attempted to kind of make that its own distinct element. I think, you know, we could make it a little bit louder if that's kind of what you're looking for. Obviously, there's some limitations. There's height limitations and whatnot that don't allow us to maybe pop that element as high as we'd want it to be. So we're kind of, you know, restricted there, but, you know, certainly we were conscious of those previous comments and at least as a starting point, you know, orienting some of the building functions towards that corner is kind of the approach that we took. And I do think it opens up that corner a lot more than previously in previous iterations.
I agree with that.
So, I mean, we're certainly open to further exploring that corner and what we could do to make it stand out, you know, as a distinctive element.
I share what Jeff said. We saw the elevations, I think, was all we saw before today, so we haven't had a chance to study
Okay.
the site plan or landscaping and so forth. At the second floor level, looking at the elevation at that corner, when you get to the apartment level, are those set back? It looks like, I can't see that in the, maybe they are.
Down in Main and Packard, Jimmy, Bill, the view we're looking at now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the same view, but the darker colored brick, the two-story part, looks like there's balcony behind that?
At the,
No,
at the third
that's what I
story,
was
you're
thinking.
asking?
Yes.
I think it's just
Yeah,
a-
it's set back 5 feet at the
It's-
third story.
It's what?
It's set back 5 feet at the third story.
So is that balcony all the way around there then?
So it's a balcony, yeah, it goes all the way around the building then? 'cause I'm
It's,
looking at the
it's not
photos.
balcony, but
Well,
it's
it's
set back. It's rooftop, it's set
Yeah, I
back.
can see that. So that's a continuous balcony. It looks, I mean, I'm looking at SPO 3. It looks like a continuous balcony all the way around.
It's not a balcony use, but it is a setback, so
It's a setback, but you
it's a
can't-
setback, but it's not intended for.
You can't step out.
Correct, yes.
Got
So
it.
this, there's a setback here, just like there is right here.
Correct,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a
This-
setback
Actually,
actually.
all of this, even the corner element is
Even the
setback.
center part
Yeah.
is setback here. Look at this, look at SPO 3.
Does the upper terrace then, halfway down Main Street, become
This-
activated?
It's all the way around here.
That setback
Yeah,
much
the
more?
big opening.
What is
yes.
that?
I mean, it's an amenity deck, so there's a large heated tub, hot tub or pool, and there's trellis elements and fire pits, and, we do have some development on that area that's kind of happened within the past few weeks from the landscape architects, so we could provide that information as well.
Okay.
I'm going back to that same corner. Is that setback part of the requirement, the setback from the city? You've
Yes.
got to step it back X
Correct,
number of
yes.
feet. Okay.
So they're a 2 to 3 story street wall with a 5-foot step back.
I think our general concern, and at least I'm guessing, at least my general concern is that the building is really flat. I think it's really nice that you've broken it up quite a bit. I think it's kind of more articulated in terms of mass than it was before. The ins and outs and the recess for the pool deck and things like that, I think are an improvement. But really, the facade is just so flat. You're gonna have thin brick and, like you said, inches between that and the panels. The windows, I get a feeling, are gonna be very flush, and then the treatment of the windows with the shaded or the darker brick to try to expand their appearance, I think is not gonna be terribly successful. I think the best example I've seen of that is maybe the Varsity, where what they did was they recessed the window, at least the thickness of a brick, and created a bigger recess, and then put a window, smaller window within the recess, and then used a darker brick. And they employed like header courses and soldier courses to kind of highlight that. I don't see any of that. The brick just goes from one color to another color and doesn't appear to occur at any line or any recess. I think throughout the building, that's kind of an issue. Another important elevation, I think, is the view from the northeast across the beer depot parking lot. That's a pretty blank facade that we will end up seeing there. The retail doesn't turn the corner at all, which maybe it could turn a little bit. Even the first floor spaces that are going to be retail, maybe could have more ins and outs. And I think the lobby area where I think the lobby area where you have the standard name, it shows on plan that that's very shallow recess or angle, but it's a blank space on Main Street with 2 hollow metal doors in it. So those are some of the issues that I'm concerned about. I'd like to see some more detail on the facade and more depth wherever you can get it.
How many occupants will the building house?
There's 218 units.
And many of them are multi-students?
Correct, yeah. I believe 420 bedrooms, I believe, somewhere around there.
Okay, thanks. I have to agree with Gary that it's really flat. The renderings were, I was hopeful when I saw the renderings that there was more depth and more reveal between these masses, but you're just not going to be able to accomplish it with thin brick and metal panels. And I think the message you need to take back to Landmark is they need to devote more budget to this building. It needs more detail. It needs more richness. The building right across the street, it sets a good example. Ashley Muse is really rich in detail, and it extends Main Street to the south a lot more appropriately than this is going to. I think it's very flat. I'm a little disappointed to hear the choice of materials. And it appears you took every opportunity to save money.
I agree with all the comments about the flatness, and you probably were faced with a budget requirement, but that doesn't change the fact that it is, I can't remember where it is in the guidelines, but when the guidelines were being developed, there was some discussion about one building in particular and how flat it was.
Yeah.
That's the corner, it's above the BW3, corner of State and Washington, that it's a very, very flat facade, and it is not, I'm the non-architect here, I'll just say it's not appealing. There are probably better terms than use than
It's
to use than that.
probably why this board exists.
Yes.
And very small windows.
Small windows, it was flush with a thin brick, and my recollection is that there were statements made in the guidelines as to having some kind of dimensional setback, all the terms that Gary and Dick were using. I echo that there needs to be some kind of richness here, and that's, I think, going back to Landmark with that message, I think would be very important.
One of my
That-
concerns.
Yeah, I do, but please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
From a circulation standpoint on the site, I think you mentioned that the alley is two-way as it's being used, but it's a 16-foot alley. I don't know why the city hasn't turned that into a one-way space. I don't see how one car can lay by while another one passes in 16 feet. So I guess my concern is that from a functional standpoint, it seems like that space should be used mostly as northbound access, so when people are coming in to park, sorry, I'm not making eye contact, but I'm looking at your drawing here. As they're coming in to park, they're going to be coming in from Packard. It's not going to be really, at least I don't think it should be encouraged that they come down the alley from William Street. So I'm wondering if that whole thing should begin to be treated as though the alley is going to ultimately function as a one-way going north piece. So the parking spaces should orient on an angle so that when people back out, they're encouraged to go north instead of trying to, do a few special Ks to go south. When you come out of the parking structure at the northern access point, that people are encouraged to turn and go up to William Street instead of trying to make it down to Packard.
Is the alley north of Williams one-way or two-way?
Right now, the
Yeah, it's
ramp
two-way.
down is from, it assumes you're coming from the south. That's the ramp down.
Right.
Yeah, it's at
And you
45.
would be crossing lanes. And my concern, that certainly would indicate that north
Right.
orientation would be better. I was more concerned with the ramp up and coming up and making a turn. If there's two-way traffic, look at the turning radius. You gotta have a mighty tight turning radius to get into that lane. Well, it's just coming up and making a turn. You can certainly cross that, but that, I would think, is gonna be a challenge somehow or other in that width.
Yeah, so I
I
like
know,
the
I know
idea.
there's been a lot of discussion, with the neighborhood about the alley. Luke, I don't know if you can speak more about.
The alley's been a big point of the discussion, and maintaining it for the ability for traffic to go both ways was extremely important to the neighboring property owners.
Jeff?
Thanks, Dick. Just a few comments. One was we, as staff, appreciated the number of improvements that Majewski's team brought to the table. One was a critical issue of creating a wider sidewalk on William. We wanted an extra 8 feet. They provided that. That's huge to us. We felt that their treatment along Packard was a big improvement, being more flush, utilizing land more efficiently instead of the saw cut or the stair step approach last time. It was sort of an afterthought last time to us. We thought that the improvements along South Main Street were great at the first floor level. There used to be caves, what we saw as being little caves stuck along that section. So we thought that the elevations here showed an improvement. We appreciate maintaining the retail along William. We liked a tower feature along the William Main corner. And we appreciated the symmetry of the balcony treatment. So we thought that in a number of ways with regard to the massing, the building improved substantially. We had a few suggestions. One, we were disappointed with the window sizes. We recognize that there are cost implications and all, and we had hoped for larger window treatment. We didn't love the window shadowing that's being proposed. But we do recognize that it looks like an attempt to minimize the additional costs. And then lastly, staff was hoping for richer colors of the brick. We think that brick color doesn't have to be that much more expensive, and it could be a way to add real beauty to the building itself. One staff member thought the color palette looked like Ashley Terrace. Some of our younger staff members thought that it sort of looked maybe more of a senior housing type of a product, softer, safer tones instead of tones that were more vivid. And that's my summary.
I had a few things I forgot. The view we're looking at right now, when you look at the tower element on the south wall, is it changing materials when you get 20 feet back from brick to a metal panel? You see what I mean? Up at the very top, you can see that gray of the tower.
You're saying this element?
No, the tower up on William in Maine.
Oh, over back here?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. It does change materials, yeah.
You know,
I mean, that's kind of the rhythm of the project, how, we kind of wrap corners and then accentuate it with material change, so we don't have a, extensive facade of just a single material.
all right. And could you, Josh, go to the view that looks at the corner of Main and William? Yeah, that one. The second story element, I know you must have struggled with this, and you're trying to maintain the two-story street wall that is in the ordinance. But maybe at the corner, there could be an exception. One of our guidelines talks about celebrating the corners and doing something different. That might have been a spot, since the language above that two-story element changes so dramatically, and you have a taller storefront below. That might be a place to do something different. I don't know if you considered that, or if you just felt like by ordinance you had to continue that two-story street wall all the way around the corner. Maybe you don't. Maybe there's a better solution at the corner.
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely conscious of that while we were designing it.
Okay.
I mean, the solution was to, even though there's a setback, to kind of keep that material and kind of keep that read on the corner. So even though it's a different plane, it kind of reads that it's kind of coming to the ground.
I see. Okay. Okay. Other comments? Everybody's all set? Okay, all right, thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate your coming.
Thanks.
Let's see, we have communications to the design review board. Anything, Jeff?
We do have a submittal for next month.
Oh, okay, guys.
We have a submittal for the December 11th DRB meeting for 304 East Huron, which is the old Ann Arbor News building, which includes a very modest renovation.
Okay, good. Any other communications? Okay. So now it's public commentary time about this project that we just reviewed. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Well, I want to thank Majewski Architects and Luke Bonner for having so many meetings, and I think I went to all of the public meetings. So I have been watching this project from the get-go. It's been, I don't know, a year and a half or something. And I've been very outspoken, I usually am, because this is such an important corner in Ann Arbor, and it's going to be there for decades and decades and decades, if not more than 100 years. So I have a lot to say about this. There has been an evolution in the color palette. The last time I saw the renderings for this building, it was like Son of Darth Vader, and I told John Majewski that. I said, this looks like a Darth Vader building. This is an improvement, but I agree with all of you who have said that the color palette should be warmer. That was my position as well. I think that the warmth that is possible with brick brings a real ambiance to the downtown that we want to encourage, and we have it already in our historic buildings and in Ashley Muse and in the other buildings that are further down on Main Street. So I'd still like to see that change. I want to say that when Majewski Architects did the hub on Huron, they used a lot of wood, and it's a wonderful accent. Something that I find ominous and oppressive about this building is the use of black metal. If they could change that to wood, it would go a long way in improving the building. Another thing I don't like about metal is that it conducts temperature. On the south facade of the building, there along Packard, I really feel sorry for those people who'd have that black around their balconies and windows trying to cool their apartments in the summer or heat them in the winter, because it's going to absorb temperatures. It's not a good material for a big building when we're looking at sustainability and climate change and trying to make buildings more efficient in terms of heating and cooling. It just isn't. Another thing that could really help this building a lot, and this isn't under necessarily the purview of design review, but it needs a green roof or solar panels or something to assist the Ann Arbor community in addressing climate change, because we're really committed to it. I'm glad that you mentioned Ashley Muse, Dick. I think it's a very handsome building. It's one of my favorites in terms of course, my favorites are all 19th century buildings, but it's one of my favorites in terms of 20th century and 21st century buildings. I agree with John. In fact, even before you mentioned the art, John, I had written down in my notes that there are lots of opportunities for public art on this building. There's a certain inevitable monotony that architects are committed to in designing buildings these days. They beg for art, which is why people become self-appointed artists and tag buildings with graffiti. I really think it's human nature crying out for some kind of artistic expression. I think that the entrance to the alleyway, the one that's on William, is going to be a prime place for graffiti unless something is done there along that alleyway. I also feel that with the corner treatment, all that grayness about the corner, where it turns the corner, that's another opportunity for art. That's a huge expanse of blah, just blah. So I guess that's about it. There's one thing I mentioned to John Majewski, and that is there's another building in Ann Arbor with the name The Standard. It's a restaurant, and it's between Ann Arbor and Dexter, and I question the use of the name again for this building. I know lawsuits even come out of that sort of thing too, because of the inevitable confusion. So I thank the architects and developers for allowing the community to have so much input, but I still think that this building has a way to go. By the way, I do like the facade on Packard much better than the zigzag that was originally there. I think I think the architecture has come a long way, but it still could go a long way and be much, much better. We'll have to live with this for a long time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Shirley Knudsen, and I'm a property owner of, on Fourth, and my property backs right up to the alley, so I'm especially concerned with the alley. I'm very familiar with the life of the alley, and with the beer depot and the senior housing that are at either ends, there's vagrants, and I understand that there's going to be increased security. However, it's going to be an issue. There's going to be the vagrants continuing to be there, people coming from the beer depot. Senior housing isn't that much of an issue, but it's still, there's a lot of traffic between there. I was wondering about the trucks that go into the beer depot. Realistically, they do have to have a place to park. They can't just be pushed out. So that's going to be blocking for a period of time. I think they maybe have a 20-minute period of time. I'm not sure what the legal requirements are there, but they'll be blocking that period. And I don't see that there's any way that they can be out of the way. UPS for the retail is going to be, I had a retail space on Main Street, and I know that UPS is constantly coming and going for those spaces. So where are they going to park? And I was wondering about the entrance to the retail. There must be doors that go into those retail spaces. Is that correct? Yes? I can't see where they are. Could you point out where the doors are to the retail space?
They're to the right and to the left of that corner, so if you go to the edge of the glass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'd also second all the art suggestions. I think that would be great to bring more life and interest there. I think that's it. So the alleyway is definitely, I think, something that really has to be thought about.
Can I just say one more thing I forgot?
Come up to the mic if you would, Chris, thanks.
Do not kid yourself. You will have a big move-in and move-out period, and you need to prepare for it. Everywhere in Ann Arbor, at the end of August, beginning of September, streets are closed off, and there will be, if you have students living in this building, and you probably will, I don't care how well furnished it is, they've got a lot of stuff, and they bring it with them. And there is, just to give you an example, I share a driveway with the house next door, which is a rental. It has 3 apartments, and our driveway this past August was filled with 8 cars for the entire day with students moving all their stuff in. It's a fully furnished house. So they bring a lot of stuff, I don't care where it is. So you need to prepare for that in the planning of the program of this building. You'll have a big move in and move out.
Thanks. Any other comment? Okay, I think we're adjourned. Thank you very much.